Guys, you've got to live your one life. You've got to live your one life. Right, welcome back to the Inner Self Rising podcast, a podcast for free thinkers focused on self-development and living authentically. Today, I have another special, amazing guest, my friend Michele. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I'm so honored to be here.
Man, it's so good to have you here, and I've been looking forward to it for.
Yeah, same. And looking forward to meeting you in person for the first time.
Yes. Although it feels like we've been friends for forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. It's really good to meet you in person, and you're the same as you are as on the phone and all. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. But today we're here to talk about your story of you got cancelled.
Yeah. Infamous.
Yeah, you're like, it's disgusting what happened to you.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
The story's crazy, but basically, I got introduced to you. So when all of your cancellation was happening, I had no idea.
I wish you had. That would have been fabulous to know you then. Yeah.
Oh my God, I wish I'd known
Yeah.
about your story. I wish I'd known what was going on in that time period. I really do. But I had no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And the reason why how I found out about this story is I was going to be, had a book coming out, and I was going to, so my old publisher was going to publish my second book, a chapbook. And then he ended up withdrawing from publishing my collection because, according to him, my work is Islamophobic, and I was being Islamophobic, and accused me of being a right winger.
Yeah, right.
And just for context, he's like an extreme Marxist. He's a white,
gotcha.
Old man, and
Yeah.
That
astounds me. It just astounds me that you were told by some white Australian that you could not write about your experience growing up and your faith and so on, and that you were Islamophobic.
Yeah,
that's insane.
It's absolutely and he was like an extreme atheist. So he hates religion, and he thinks anyone that believes in a god or a superpower or whatever is stupid,
Right.
and less than.
Right.
But for whatever reason, he gives Islam he gives a concession to
Gets a pass.
to Islam. Yeah. And so, ultimately for him, it's like, it's cute that you, person of the East wants to, embody the Enlightenment. You want to, embody, human rights and all that sort of stuff. It's cute that you want to do that, but no, what your culture is, that's who you are. The Enlightenment's for us.
Yeah.
I can question Christianity. I can leave Christianity. I can critique Christianity. It's for me. But for you, no, you can't. It's cute that you want to, participate and play in that realm, but no, it's not for you. That's the message that I got, It was crazy. And then I ended up speaking to a friend of mine, and I was just telling her what had happened. And then we met up, and she was amazing, and I was just basically venting and debriefing about how crazy this the lit scene is, literary scene is, and how much it's the woke movement has captured the literary scene.
Yeah.
And then she said, "Do you know Michele Seminara?" And I said, "No, I don't." And then she said, "Oh, you haven't heard? You don't know who she is? You haven't heard their story?"
You must be the only one. No, that sounds a bit arrogant, doesn't it? I just mean I'm used to sort of going around ducking my head thinking, oh God, has my reputation preceded me?
No, I understand why you say that. And I said, no, I don't. And then she said, oh, look, when I go home tonight, I'll send you her article, the article you wrote.
Is that griftivism?
Griftivism,
yeah.
you wrote. And then I read the article, and I was like, I was about to say,
Go on, swear. Go on.
I was about to say, and then I said, you have to introduce me to Michele because this article is amazing. And I had been looking for people in the industry who were not woke.
Yeah.
They're so far and few in between, and the ones who are not woke are so scared.
Yeah.
That they're in their little corners and they're just completely shut down.
Yep.
And so for a long time, I thought the only way there's going to be any kind of pushback against the woke movement is if someone is unfortunately cancelled and really attacked, really abused. Actually, is actually the right word.
Yeah.
By the woke mob. To then realize how serious this whole thing is, because a lot of people think they can just, if I just keep quiet, then it won't come to me and I'll be able to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way, it doesn't. It's a beast that's looking to eat everything and anything, So anyway, so then that friend, sent me an article. I read it. You got to introduce me. You have to. And then she did.
Yeah.
And then we've been like...
It's been fabulous. It's been so wonderful to discover you as a friend and as a person who has sort of similar ways of thinking. It's wonderful to find someone to be able to speak freely with as well, and who's not afraid to speak freely. So yes, when we were introduced, then I thought to myself, okay, I better Google this guy, find out who he is, because I didn't know who you were or much about you. And I found your podcast, Inner Self Rising, the one we are on, and I listened to a couple of the first episodes, and I was like, oh my God, he's going there. He's saying all this stuff that I've never heard anyone in Australia say in the arts, and I was really impressed. So I was very excited.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad. I did that episode because I was, I had my own experiences with, prior to my publisher, I had my own experiences with a woke mob myself, And so they sort of awoken me to, ironically, awoken me to the whole woke stuff, because I was seeing it was a black collective. And they were, extremely anti-white, anti-male, anti-hetero straight people.
Yeah.
And so, to me, hate is hate. I don't care what. Hate is hate. I don't care if you're black, white, male, female, straight, gay, whatever it is. Hate is hate.
Yeah.
And the fact that certain people try to justify hate under the guise of social justice is pure evil to me.
Yeah.
And so I saw that, and I saw the way they were behaving, and I saw that anyone who didn't fall into the category of the oppressed had a target. So it didn't matter in that group that I was black, African. It didn't matter, but because I was a male, that was the target that was put on me. Yeah. So they couldn't go for the black thing because I'm black.
Yeah.
So what they could go for is the fact that I was male.
How dare you be born male, Morgan?
I know it was a sin. It was a sin for me. If they only told me when I was born.
You can't have an opinion.
No. It was crazy. So I ended up leaving that collective because it was just full of hate. Full of hate and just trying to tear down. Because they don't build things; they tear things down, leave, tear something else down, leave. They never build anything.
That's right. Well, that was my experience. I initially, so, just to let people know, what happened with me. Initially, so I was the managing editor of a journal called Verity La. Yep. And we were quite a leftist journal, because that's my sort of natural politics. And I thought we were doing some pretty good work. I didn't realise that I'd stumbled into sort of like a woke space because I wasn't really up on the sort of critical social justice ideology. I just thought, we had streams of publishing where we had editors, who had that lived experience, So we had like a mental health writing stream. We had a stream for Indigenous writers. We had a stream for disabled writers. We had a stream for diasporic writers. And these were all, I just stepped back I set these up because I thought this is a good thing to do, right? And we're going to get some exciting work out of there. some interesting voices, encourage new and different voices. So that was my motivation. Set these writing streams up so they could be published in the journal, put editors in charge who had that lived experience. And so I thought, we're ticking along, we're doing some important work, we were publishing some really interesting work. And then 2020 happened, which was, the crazy summer of 2020. It was winter, I suppose, more for us. Once COVID hit and everyone was at home in front of their computers going crazy and having huge anxiety, And then, of course, George Floyd was murdered, and so that increased tensions. And there was this sort of perfect storm building for a lot of people to be cancelled. I didn't think it would be me or us, because I certainly didn't see myself as a white supremacist, that's for sure, or our journal. Like, if you look at the contents of Verity La, and it's online, anyone can go and have a look. It's full of diverse, voices. I don't like that word anymore, but it's full of work from all sorts of people, from all sorts of backgrounds. I don't know how people could look at it and go, that's a white supremacist journal. We're doing a really bad job if that's the case, right? Yeah. But anyway, it didn't matter. So we published a story which one person took offence to, and the rest is history. It all just kind of snowballed, and next thing you know, there were these allegations of abuse and stalking and white supremacy. It just really went nuts. Yeah.
So who was this person? That
Sydney poet called Eileen, and she and I were, I wouldn't say good friends, but we were friendly. We'd meet every now and again for coffee or lunch and that sort of thing. And she was actually on the advisory board of the journal. So I had thought she was a friend. I didn't realise I'd befriended someone who, wasn't really what they seemed. It was, it's quite a revelation in many ways. So she messaged me one Saturday morning, and she said a piece that we had published a month earlier and that had been on the journal without any complaints or furor for a month.
We can get there, but I just want to backtrack a little.
Yeah.
So how did you meet her?
I met Eileen through the journal, through Verity La. So we published some of her work, and then we had a poetry podcast, and we reached out to interview her as part of the poetry podcast. So I actually went to her house and interviewed her, and I probably knew her for about a year before the Verity La stuff happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And was there much communication during that period when you were interviewing her?
Yeah, as I said, we gradually became friends. We'd meet for coffee, we'd meet for lunch. And then I did ask her to be on the advisory board of the journal. Initially I thought she was quite a nice person. She does come across quite warmly. There were a few sort of red flags, which I ignored because I usually do. And I usually like to see the best in people. And so it wasn't till later when things started to go awry that other people sort of crawled out of the woodwork and said, oh, no, actually we've had these experiences with this person as well. So.
And what were some of the red flags that you had ignored initially? You could.
She very much enjoyed drama. She was always looking to be quite gossipy and judgmental of others, which is something I'm not really into, and I probably should have, read that as a red flag. She sort of, there was an incident where I was judging a poetry prize for Queensland Poetry Festival, and something went wrong in their admin, and someone there accidentally CC'd instead of BC'd an email with the names of all the people who were putting their work in for the prize. That was the prize I was judging. Eileen had put some work in for this particular prize, and so
for those who don't know the process, you're not meant to see the as a judge. You're not meant to see the names at all.
So it was going to be blind judged, you know, so that there's no special treatment for people.
Right.
For example, if I was judging and I knew you were, your name was there, so I don't look more kindly upon your poem than someone else's. Right. So that was obviously an issue for the people who were running the prize. I didn't know anything about this. Eileen got the email because she had put a poem in for the prize, and she saw everybody else's names. Nice. And then she forwarded that email to me, and she said, "You need to withdraw from judging this prize, Michele. It's been compromised." And I said, "Well, I haven't been compromised, Elaine, because I haven't seen. No one sent me this email except for her just then. Yeah. I haven't seen. Still don't know who's who. I haven't seen this list of names. You have, but I haven't." And she said, "No, you've seen them now because I've sent them to you, and you can't say you haven't because it's now in your inbox." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a bit sabotagey, and in the end, what I did end up withdrawing as the judge for that prize for that year, which was, sad because it's hard to get jobs in the arts, and that was a job that I appreciated having and wanted to do. So I felt a bit sabotaged, but I felt that if I hadn't withdrawn and then complaints were made that there was some special treatment in the judging, that possibly because that email was sitting in my inbox from Elaine, that I could have opened it, I could have seen it. How could I prove I hadn't? It was there now. But to me, that felt very odd that she would have done that. I did say that to her later on, and she did apologise, and we sort of moved on. But things like that, I probably should have thought to myself, okay, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That's nasty work. Yeah,
it is nasty work, isn't it? You wouldn't do that to a friend or to anyone, really.
No. But it just shows that it's very calculative in what she was doing. It just shows that she clearly obviously knows the rules.
Yeah.
But she used the rules against you, and sent you that list. So then she could say, "Well, you can't judge now because you've seen the." Yeah. That's a mind fuck right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, so she did tend to be in the middle of dramas, and that was something I saw a little bit of before the cancellation happened. But I still was really blindsided by how quickly she changed. The warm person that I knew, who I could chat to about an issue, disappeared and was replaced by somebody who just had this one agenda. That sort of, that critical social justice speak, all the phrases, suddenly that's all I was getting. It was very, very shocking to see the flip in everybody. Yeah. Her first and foremost.
Of course. Yeah. So then she becomes a board member after.
Yeah, I invited her to be an advisory board member. And
so just for timeline's sake, so she did the first sabotaging and then became a board member. Or was she?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
After we moved on from that. That wasn't really a big incident. For me inside, it was like, oh, that was a bit odd. But, I'm keen to give the benefit of the doubt. Probably too much, I think. And so we moved on.
So did she ever apologise? She did. Bring it up? Okay.
Yeah, she did apologise, yeah. We moved on. She was an advisory board member, and I was happy to have her there. She did advise on something. There was an incident before the cancellation where we had published another piece by a writer, which was a sort of creative non-fiction piece as well, and it mentioned a writer, a living writer in Sydney, and how this girl had looked up to this woman, and it described her physically in a way that I took as complimentary, and certainly the author didn't mean anything with it. But I got a call one Saturday night from Elaine, and she said, the author who's been mentioned in this piece is really unhappy with the way she's been described. She finds it, insulting. And I was like, oh dear, that, there's no intentions at all. And so I took the piece, and I appreciate that feedback. I thought that it was just feedback coming from that writer to Elaine, but now I think Elaine probably showed her. I'm just supposing, but it seemed weird because once again this piece had been up for a bit, and suddenly there was a complaint, you know. Yeah. But anyway, she showed her. We took the piece back to a draft, and I ended up talking to the author of the piece, and then to the author that was mentioned in the piece, and we tried to edit the piece so that the author who was mentioned was happy, and in the end she wasn't. So the author who wrote the piece said, you know what, I didn't write it to offend anybody. I really admire this writer. I'd rather just take it down. And I said, that's fine, we'll just take it down. So that was a nice resolution. And so then I was surprised when a couple of weeks later, rather than things be sorted out in a way like that where you're able to talk through things, I got a series of text messages from Eileen, and it was basically I read this piece, which was a piece called About Lynn by a writer called Stuart Cook. I read this piece in the journal when it came out, which was a month previously. I read it when it came out. I didn't like it. I think it was sexist and racist, but I thought it's not my issue. But I would like to resign from the journal, and I don't have confidence in you as an editor anymore. And I said, oh, could we talk about this? Can I give you a call? And she sort of made an excuse and said, no, I can't talk now. And I was a bit taken aback because we were friends and we'd managed to talk through the other issue. And I thought, well, you talk to someone. I'm old school. You pick up the phone, right? You don't send someone a message and say, that's it, I'm resigning, I'm not happy, you know. Okay. So I said, okay, let's talk about it later when you're able to talk. And she said, okay. And then the next day she sent me a email saying she wished to resign as advisory board member from the journal. And I wrote her an email back saying, you know, I really value your feedback. Please stay on. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. And then there was that flip in the language. Suddenly I wasn't talking to my friend anymore. I was talking to this critical social justice ideologue. It was like, no, you can't see that you are doing this to marginalise people and doing that. And it was just all this sort of, and I was like, oh, the tone has changed really quickly. Yeah. So, you know, I had to leave it, but I said to her, I'm going to, you know, take your complaint seriously. I'll take it to because we just become sort of an incorporated association at Verity La and set up our little board, an advisory board, and that was new for me. Before I was rowing my own boat in that sense. But I thought, I better report this complaint to the board. So I did so. The board decided to get the piece peer reviewed, which we spent a week getting the piece peer reviewed. But in the end, there was only one complaint. And
so you thought. You know,
well, so I thought, this is what I thought at the time. Anyway, they decided to keep it up, and the author decided to keep it up initially. But I didn't realise that in that week, while I was rushing around in goodwill trying to figure out, have I done the right thing? Haven't I done the right thing? Is there an issue with this story? Have I missed something? Getting it peer reviewed, getting a lot of other people's opinions, really genuinely trying to figure out, like, you know, because Verity La was a labour of love for me. It was all voluntary work for me. I managed to get funding to pay the writers. I would fundraise at the end of every year to pay all the other editors, like an honorary, you know, thank you sum of a few $100s, you know. But you know, I would work about 20 hours a week with this journal. I was really excited about what we were doing. I certainly wasn't there to offend people. So I was running around for that week trying to get all these opinions and feedback, thinking, have I done the right, you know, you've got to question yourself. Yes. But, you know, the peer review came back that the piece, okay, it might not be to everyone's point of view, but it was exposing a sort of a unsavoury truth for reasons, not in order to elevate what the character in the story was doing. So the character in the story went to the Philippines and had a sexual relationship with a local woman, and he was basically sort of, you know, toying with her a little bit. He knew there was nothing more serious. She wanted something more serious. And anyway, that was pretty much what people objected to in the story, that a white male was going to a country having this sexual affair with a woman that within that critical social justice dynamic they saw as oppressed, and therefore he was the oppressor, and that we shouldn't platform this sort of writing. And our point of view on it, and the author's intention was to show an unsavoury truth, because men do this, and art has to explore unsavoury truths. So anyway, long story short, we kept the piece up with a trigger warning, which I hate trigger warnings now. I've changed my attitudes on things so much, but I thought at the time it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It just made things worse, which I know you can tell. But I didn't realise that behind the scenes in that week when I was rushing around trying to figure out what the right thing to do was by everybody, that she was gathering forces to start this cancellation.
The smear campaign.
Yeah, the smear campaign. Yeah.
So, your story, you can tell me how you feel about this, but I think it's what you went through was narcissistic abuse. That's it has all the hallmarks of narcissistic abuse. The devaluing, the smear campaigns, the the gaslighting, all the clear tactics, the attacks, throwing, bombs and then hiding their hand. The victim hero switch. You try and communicate with her, but she doesn't want to communicate. But then she's creating a smear campaign to attack you online. But she's doing it because she's this victim that's just standing up for the rights of
That's right. She very
people.
much cast herself as the social justice warrior. So I didn't, at the time, I wish I could get back all those hours and days and months of my life that I bothered trying to engage with her and with other people around her, because it was such a waste of time, because I was coming from a position where I was trying to really figure out what is the best thing to do. This is a complicated issue. You can't just start censoring work because you get one complaint, but then you can't just go around publishing outrageous things. Well, what do we do? What I didn't realise is that I was dealing with somebody who was very much coming from a position of just basically wanting to, in my opinion, destroy, as you said earlier, a tear down. So I didn't realise that at the time. I wasted a lot of time trying to engage with people who didn't want to engage me. They wanted to destroy me. I got a phone call from someone else associated with the journal, and she said to me, Eileen is calling everybody. She's calling everybody behind the scenes. She's contacting everybody to tell them that when she brought the complaint to you, you abused her, you were rude to her, you were this and that. And I have every email and message that we sent. If there was one email or message that I sent that was abusive and horrible, it would be out there. It would be out there by now. Went so wild on Twitter, and I kept asking people, is there any evidence? Please show me the evidence. There was not one, and I was really confident in asking that question because that's not how I operate. Yeah. I don't go around abusing people. She brought the complaint. I said, please stay on. I thanked her, and I took it to our board. And from there on, it was very we had a difference of opinion, but there was no abuse. There was no, all this ridiculous stuff. So this person said to me, she's contacting everyone, and the narrative is now that when she brought the complaint to you, you were very abusive to her. And that's where things started to shift, because eventually the pressure got so much online that we did take the piece down. We issued one of those awful apologies, which is another thing I actually regret now. Yeah. But then the narrative just shifted. It continued on, because then it was no longer about, we don't like this piece, we think it's racist and sexist, you need to remove it. When we did and apologised, of course that first apology wasn't good enough, never is. Yeah. The next, it's just blood in the water, right? Yeah. Then you've got to do another apology, grovel more. Yeah. We did all that, but that still wasn't enough. Now it was Michele Seminara is a white supremacist, and then that just went on for months and months and months.
And how do they justify? I mean, I already know because
you know the playbook. Right?
Yeah, because they follow the same playbook. So, what was their justification for you being a white supremacist?
Didn't seem to need one, to be quite honest. Yeah. Like if there'd been some evidence, it would have been out there. There wasn't, so people just made shit up basically. Yeah. And I don't know. It seemed ludicrous to me, because if you look at, and they didn't just call me a white supremacist, they called the journal a white supremacist journal. And there was actually an open letter that was circulated and signed by hundreds of people who I thought were quite, I wasn't necessarily friends with them, but I was friendly with people who had met me in person.
Hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No. There was a lovely open letter that somebody started up on behalf of Eileen, and it said, Michelle is the white supremacist leader of the white supremacist journal. It was ostensibly to create New South Wales, who are our funding body for the journal, and they wanted us defunded. So this was circulated, and this was actually my lowest point, because the bullying online was just so, and I was withstanding, and then this open letter was circulated, and someone said, "Oh, you need to see this," and it was quite late at night. I just looked at it and opened it up, and I wish I had screenshot it so I could see all those names. I'd love to know every person who signed it. But I was actually just so despondent at that point. I just turned off my computer and put it away. And I said to my husband, who had to, he was the treasurer on the board of the journal, and I said to him, I can't cope anymore. I said, could you just email everyone tomorrow? We're shutting down. That's it. Just knowing that hundreds and hundreds of people were like willing to put their name to that, that was like my low point. And I think I just took a sleeping pill and just thought, right, that's it. I can't do this anymore. And then strangely enough, the next morning I woke up and the open letter had disappeared. I still don't know why it got taken down. There was someone said, there was something said on Twitter that somebody, because it was a Google Doc, right, and anyone who goes to sign it could edit it. Right. So someone had gone in and edited it in some way, and they must have said something, must have changed it more in my favour or against the people who were, it annoyed the people who had set the the doc up anyway, the open letter up, or the ransom note, as I like to call them. So they said, oh, someone came in and changed it, and we're getting pressure, blah, blah, we've had to take it down. I've never been able to find out who that person who changed it was. If you're there, thank you. Yeah, don't know who they are. An angel. So then reach out. Reach out. Yeah. So it was really odd. Like all these odd things happened, so that it disappeared, and then I started to think, okay, maybe there is a little bit of support out there. Maybe not everybody hates me. Not everyone thinks I've done the wrong thing. It was just really crazy time.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that they had set up that petition, but it makes complete sense, because you know, goal is to destruct. You know, they always talk about deconstruct. Yeah, they're always talking about deconstruct, but I take them literally. Yeah, they want to destroy everything. Yeah, you know. Man, I'm so sorry you went through that. That's crazy. Yeah,
it was really crazy. I kept thinking, because this was obviously at a really hard time for everyone. It was during all the long COVID lockdowns. Yeah. I just used to sit outside at night and look up at the stars. And I found out as well, we had this lovely Labrador, and he had a little cough, and I kept thinking, I should take him to the vet. But during this time I was so stressed and wasting all my time trying to solve this situation, which was so fruitless. Yeah. I finally did take him to the vet, and he had a genetic heart condition, and they said, he's only got 3 to 6 months to live. And he sort of, because his heart was failing, he was bloating up and he couldn't breathe and settle very well at night. So he was wandering around the house, and then I started waking up at 3 a.m. every night, having horrible nightmares, thinking, just nightmares of people, everyone just condemning you. I would have nightmares where I was reading emails in my mind, people saying, you white supremacist, and I'd wake up going, and then my poor dog was wandering around. And so we'd just go and sit outside, and I'd just look up at the stars and just think, this is such an odd thing. Anyone who knows me would say, what? This is a very odd thing to be happening to you, because I'm not generally a very confrontational person. Right. It's just it doesn't align with my values or how I've lived my life. Yeah. But I think that some of that niceness might have made me an easy target, to be honest.
Well, and also because because these people are power hungry. They're all power hungry. Yeah. So you're managing editor of a successful journal. Yeah. You're also a white woman. I'm sorry, that's also
it's
part
true.
of that's. Also
I didn't realize
that.
that's. I thought at the time we were doing good things, and we were finding interesting voices right through the work we were doing with the journal and with those publishing streams I mentioned previously. I didn't realise I was positioned in a social justice space, because I didn't even know what that was at that time, right? I was just going on instinct and following my heart and doing what I thought was a good thing to do, an interesting thing to do artistically. So I was really surprised to find myself cast as this, white devil, basically. It was the best of times and the worst of times, Mark. And because those things do test you as a person. It does, and I think that's why this is the perfect podcast to discuss it on, because cancellation, in a sense, are a dark night of the soul. And for someone like me, I still am, I fight against it, a real people pleaser, right? And it's actually my worst nightmare to have just about everyone I know. I mean, I'm lucky, not my family and not my very close friends who aren't involved in the arts world. And luckily I had that, so that kept me grounded and sane. But, to have everybody else I respected and whose respect I wanted in the arts community basically either jumping on board and putting the knife in or sitting back while other people did, that was my worst nightmare. Like I'm not that sort of person who can just go, oh, that's fine, they can think what they want, I know who I am. So I had to really figure out who I was. I had to dig deep and think, okay, here I am. It's my worst nightmare. Everyone fucking hates me. I started to feel so ashamed of myself. Is it true? Am I this person? Maybe I am unconsciously this, and I had to really go through all that and just sat there looking up the stars with my poor old dog and dig deep. And I had to find the strength to say, okay, I have to just decide, am I that person? No, I don't think I'm that person. Okay, well then I need to stand by myself and I need to have the courage of my own convictions and keep making the decisions I think are right so that I can lie straight in bed at night. And even if everyone in the world turns against me and says I'm this and that, at least I know who I am then. Right. And that was my sort of only guiding principle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting that you say, you started questioning yourself, am I this white supremacist, you know, and these people operate in the same way that it's the same way as religion. When they're casting sin upon someone, and making the person question their sense of self because of this arbitrary sin. You don't really, it's just when they're thrown on you and it makes you question your entire sense of self. And that's the goal. I reckon that's the goal
because that's how you psychologically break somebody.
Yes. Break them and if you can't, because I suspect that she knew she couldn't ultimately control you. So that's when the
rage, excuse me,
rage and
have a drink.
And the attempt at breaking your spirit.
Yeah.
And so what happened after that?
It's really hard. I've written an article about it, so if anybody wants to read it, maybe we can put the link in the show notes, because sometimes it all happens so quickly, it just kind of gets a little bit confused in your mind. I think that's part of it. It's kind of an ambush situation. We let Eileen know that the piece would stand and why. And then a couple of the editors on the journal said they didn't disagree, and then they went to Facebook and started sort of saying, we're resigning. And then the next morning I got a sort of a group letter from a group of Philippines writers. So Eunice Andrade and about 12 other co-signed writers. And it was really, I woke up and it dropped into my email, 3 a.m. or something, and it was like, we the undersigned demand you take this down, this filthy racist piece from your filthy journal. And it was really strong language, right? And I was like, wow, okay. So then I said to the board, I'm not sure, it's difficult with the board, because if it's just you can decide it's your journal. Do I keep it up? Do I put it down? But once you have a board, you're responsible. You can't move as nimbly and quickly. Right, and these people want to rush you. They want to move you quickly, so you get really befuddled, right?
That's right.
So I was like, oh, wow, okay. So then I let the board know, okay, we did have one complaint before. Now we've got 13 people signing this thing, and they are people coming from the community that the female in the piece that was objected to was written about. So we're like, okay, well, we have to think about this. What's the right thing to do once again? So, all this sort of stuff happened. I got to the afternoon, they said, take it down, but I couldn't take it down straight away because I have to talk to the author. I have to talk to the board. You can't just whip something down and censor something. So while I was once again then going through another round of negotiations and discussions, trying to figure out, okay, now we have more complaints. Now what's the right thing to do? By that afternoon, Eileen, Eunice Andrada and some other people just took it to Twitter, and it was just take it down now. And I was just really spun out. I'm like in my 50s. I'm on Twitter, but I'm certainly not like the best user of Twitter. And it was like so many messages coming at me and all these voices. And I was talking to a friend and she's like, well, just block them, and I stupidly did that.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean, I just blocked a few people. And then it was like, you're blocking women of colour. You said you wanted to hear from women of colour and now you're blocking the women of colour. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. So then I unblocked them. It didn't matter what I was doing. Like I was floundering and they wanted me to flounder, right? So, and then I apologized profusely for blocking people. I tried to reach out behind the scenes to all these people. I tried to reach out through a mediator to Eunice Andrada and because I was really open to hearing her thoughts. If she felt that piece was really offensive to a Filipino woman, of course I want to hear that and I want to talk about it. And I've offered to step back and to get one of our editors who was Filipino to commission 5 women to write from there, because one of the things was, why would you platform this male voice on our experience? We want to author our own experiences, which is a valid point. So I was like, okay, I've got this much money, I can pay you this much, I'll step away, I'll get this other editor to commission these pieces from you, decide who you want to be platformed, and we'll have your side of things, right? This will be great. Let's use this as a learning moment. Maybe we have done something wrong in putting this piece up. Maybe there is some unconscious bias I didn't realize. I don't know, right? I'm willing to let's put it all up there and let's use this as a learning moment. That wasn't what anybody wanted. I didn't realize until now how naive, or until after that, how naive that was, because then it was just, wouldn't want to be in your filthy journal now anyway. I was like, oh dear, okay. So that all just kept raging. And as I say, the narrative then went from, once the piece was taken down and we had the profuse apologies, the narrative then just quickly shifted to, well, okay, we've destroyed the journal, now we'll just go to you. And so then it was like, well, you are a bully, you stalker. I stalk people apparently. Somehow in COVID I was getting out there stalking women of colour, all these other stupid things. And it was just nuts.
It's placing themselves as victims in order to justify the abuse. Because it's for everyone else. It's performative.
That's what I didn't realise. Twitter's a performance. And I kept trying to do old school and go behind the scenes. As I said, I had a mediator to try and chat to Eunice, but Eunice wouldn't talk to me. She did talk to the mediator. And, I really wanted to talk to people. I really wanted to know, okay, what is it in this story? How can we do better in the future and so forth and so on. It wasn't. It was useless, because I was now just the enemy and someone to be destroyed. So what I realise now is that everything has to take place publicly, because it's a performance. The tearing down of you in the town square, the throwing of all these abuse at you is something that's good for people's careers. They like to be the social justice warrior, and it's quite entertaining for other people who are watching, and it also makes you a sort of an example, so that other people don't step out of line in the future, right? So all the other people watching who aren't the ones putting the boot in, but they're not going to say anything against it, but they might even be watching and not agreeing. But what they are learning as they watch is that if you dare not bow down to us, and if you don't do and say the right thing and have the right opinions, this could be you next. That's what everybody's learning through my example.
That's what regimes do. They punish so that everyone else can see what will happen to them if they step out of line. And I don't view these people any different to that. their mindset, the way they conduct themselves. I don't view them any different to a totalitarian regime who wants to, take away freedom of expression, which is what they, were doing, taking away freedom of association, because then you became a pariah. No one could associate with you anymore.
It's had such a big impact,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so things, eventually settled down somewhat to the point where at a certain point I reached out to Arts Law, not, because I didn't have the money, defamation and those sort of things. It's huge amounts of money. I didn't have the money, but at some point I reached out to Arts Law, which I was a member of, and just asking for some advice. And it's a slow process, I filled out a whole lot of forms, and it took a couple of months for them to get back to me. And finally, if they think you have, something that they can help you with, they'll eventually get back to you. So it went on and on. We couldn't publish. We tried to start publishing again because I'd been given money through Create New South Wales to pay a certain amount of writers and publish a certain amount of pieces to the end of that year, and I wanted to fulfil that. I didn't want to be bullied out of town, and I also didn't want to let down those writers. For a lot of writers withdrew their work. Basically, at this point, the journal was just me, and this was about 2 or 3 months after the initial cancellation, because what had happened was there was a whole lot of bullying that went on behind the scenes, and I'm not exactly sure who did this, but all of my editors, a lot of my editors, not all, contacted me to say that they were getting multiple phone calls. One of our editors got 50 phone calls in one weekend, telling her that she needed to denounce me, step down from the journal. Another one rang me and said, "I'm so sorry, but I have to leave the journal. It's against everything I believe, but it's terrible for my health," because she had a chronic illness. Another one of our advisory board members said, I fear about my job because he worked in academia and I'm the breadwinner for my family. I can't afford to lose this job. So it was like a McCarthyist fear was spreading, and it was getting actually quite dangerous in real world sense. So what I did in the end was take everybody's names off the journal, so no one could tell who was. I mean, they'd probably screenshot them anyway, but I didn't want to keep our editors and advisory board members and so forth, their names there. I just took everybody off. I said, that's it, we're dissolving it, right? So it was basically just me then. And so I was at that sort of stage, and I thought, okay, but I can finish the year. I can publish. A lot of people withdrew their work as well at that point because they didn't want to be published by the White Supremacist Journal, or they just didn't want the flack that would come through that. Yeah. But we had quite a lot of people still waiting publication, and they wanted publication. And so I thought, no, I'm going to see the year out. I'm going to try and publish these pieces. And when we did come back and start trying to publish again, there was just this other round of bullying. And then the people we did end up publishing, they were attacked on Twitter for publishing with us. So it just sort of went from one thing to another. And somewhere in there, I got a call finally from Arts Law, from a lovely barrister who worked with them, and he said, listen, I can see they're really doing a number on you. Yeah. He's one of the top defamations barristers in the country. I was really, really lucky. Yeah. And he said, I can see what's happening to you, and I'd really like to help you. So he helped me to write it's sort of like a cease and desist notice, basically saying, if you don't stop defaming this person, we will take you to court. Right. And he said to me, look, I really strongly suggest you do this. He said, but it will make things worse before they get better, because it outrages people when they get one of these letters, right? Yeah. And it will stop Eileen from saying things, but it won't stop anyone around who supports her. Yeah. Right. And it did. I issued that. It did make things worse before they got better. But I think in the end it was a good move to make, because it just showed people I'm not going to be completely bullied. Like, you've got enough blood out of me, move on. Right? So at some point I did that, and that's actually when someone else put together that open letter, which hundreds of people signed, because they were so outraged that on Eileen's behalf that I dare to defend myself, that I had to, be the subject of this open letter. So this happened. We managed to we managed to finish the year and publish. There was trolling of the authors, and I thought that's it. And then the next year, I wrote an art. I started to process what had happened, and I started to educate myself. Like I was so surprised this had all happened so quickly, so left field. Started to educate myself, and I realized, okay, what had happened to me had been happening in the US, the UK, already for several years. It was part of this critical social justice movement, which was starting to really get a hold, particularly in the arts, right? And then during COVID and after George Floyd, it just went on steroids and just went nuts. So I realized, it wasn't just about me. And I recognized all these terms like anti-racist. Someone said, it's not enough to be racist, you have to be anti-racist. And I was so clueless. I'm like, what's anti-racist? I don't even know what that means. So I started to educate myself about and then I started to understand, this is a thing. I got caught up in this movement, this ideology, which I didn't realize at that time. I didn't know what I was part of, So I wrote an article then about that in The Australian called My Year of Living Shamefully, which I really felt strongly about writing because I'd been ducking my head, and then COVID ended. I was happy during COVID because didn't have to go anywhere publicly. Right. Then I felt so ashamed to walk into rooms. Who's going to talk to me? Who's going to not talk to me? Who's going to duck their head? Who's going to call me a white supremacist? When COVID ended and I started to go out and about a little bit, I was feeling a lot of. I knew I wasn't really ashamed because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but it sticks to you. It
does, yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. So I wrote this article,
especially if you're a conscientious person.
Yes,
the last thing you want is to be labelled something you're not.
Yeah, that's right. It was my worst nightmare. Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I've got teenagers, and my teenage son as well. Like teenage boys are often just really politically incorrect. Like, I'm sorry, they do. They tell homophobic jokes and racist jokes, and they say also. And I'm like at home, I'm like that annoying mother who's like, don't say that. You can't use that accent. And when I got labelled the white supremacist, he thought it was hilarious. He's like, my mum, ha ha ha. He still uses it to this day to troll me. So
it's so funny. It's so funny.
So writing that article was a step to try and just reclaim myself back and say this is what happened. And also I'm worried about what this is doing to the arts and to literature in particular, and to everyone's morale. It's not an easy industry to work in anyway. People do it out of love, there's certainly a lot of money in it whatever. And people are feeling they can't now take a risk and write something because they're worried about how it will be received, or they can't. Everyone's thinking, censoring themselves, and so they should, because the fear is real, because I'm an example of what can happen if you don't, do everything in exactly the way it's required of you by that ideology. So writing that article was a way to also sort of step forward and say, well, this is happening in Australia as well. Yes. And I got a lot of support for that article, but I got a new wave of people getting onto Twitter and so forth, and saying what white woman tears, right?
Right.
That was to be expected. And then the journal pretty much lay fallow until recently. I'm now thinking of getting it. Well, I am going to get it going again. Yes. And but that's been a long journey putting myself back together. And it's been really difficult to get any work in the arts because I've had every time I get some sort of job, inevitably someone will email. So, for example, Eileen emailed my publishers when my book was due to come out in 2020, and she said, this and that about me, and they were quite wary. So my book was delayed. The publication of the book was delayed, and it wasn't really promoted because everyone was trying to keep it on the low down. No one wanted to be now publishing, the white supremacist. Whenever I would get a job, say working with a writers' festival, next thing you know, other people who were appearing at the festival who were part of this sort of same group would send emails saying, Michele Seminara, blah, 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 blah. If you employ her, we're not going to be on that panel. We're not going to do this. So really strong arming the Writers' Festival directors' choices. It's been very, very difficult. And
it doesn't take much, as you've learned. It doesn't take much to be labelled. at all.
it doesn't take
much.
any evidence. No.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So we need to get to a space where there needs to be evidence for whatever's being alleged.
I
As
agree.
a default.
Yeah.
There needs to be.
Yeah.
Because otherwise everyone can fall victim to this very easily.
Absolutely. And, so many people have. There's not that many people in the literary scene who have. I think I'm probably number one example, and yourself as well. You're an example. But yeah, overseas it's a bigger issue. But then also overseas as well, there's more talking back against it. And whereas in Australia, it's like everyone's just too scared to talk. Right? I suppose. In the US, for example, there's a whole lot of movements to cancel people, but there's also a lot of movements to counter that. Yeah. So, for example, I'm part of an organisation called FAIR in the US, and they're a group of artists who sort of bound together to stand up against these things. So they have an arm for the arts and other industries as well. So in Australia, we haven't really got that same consciousness, and I don't think people really understood actually what happened. I think they just thought that was an isolated incident, and she's a dodgy, she's a bad one, and that's that. Yeah. But it's actually part of a movement that is starting to really impact the arts. Well, has been now for many years. In a really negative way. It's making people's work boring.
Yes.
People are too scared to be artistically experimental.
Yes.
It means that the people who sort of lead these critical social justice takedowns, they elevate themselves through their warrior status, right? And everyone rewards them and applauds them, and they get more book deals. They get, Eileen went on to get $70,000 between Create New South Wales and Create Australia. For the writing of a book which has not yet been published. I don't know any poet who gets given $70,000 to write a book of poetry which hasn't appeared in 3 or 4 years. I don't know when it will appear. I'm sure it will at some stage. But that's, to me, that was like, that's people were probably too scared to say no to her. That was my feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get, if you're taking other people down under the name of being this great virtuous warrior, you will be rewarded. You'll be rewarded with you go girls, and you'll be rewarded with money. Yes. You'll be rewarded with opportunities. So this is something. This encourages a particular type of person to dominate in the arts field and to bully other people.
Right.
It also encourages other people to be too scared as well, to do anything or say anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear of which I see all the time, and it's reaching a point where, like, I'm so proud of you for coming on and telling your story, man, because there's so much fear around just even saying the most simple things, in the scene, and it's also like just stop people from thinking. People are too scared to think.
Yeah.
They're too scared to think.
And that, to me, that's the saddest thing, because when I was going through uni and started to write, like that was the 90s, right? So that was a time when we had political correctness, but that was, that was okay, because there is racism, there is sexism, there are all these things, and they do need to be brought to light and they need to be discussed, right? But that was an era where those things were coming into people's consciousness in Australia, and people were becoming aware of racism and sexism, but they were allowed to discuss it. That's the thing. They were allowed to agree and disagree. So I remember having incredible conversations, and being friends with people who had all different political persuasions and different ways of thinking than I did. It was really exciting. Like, writers are ideas people. We have to be able to exchange ideas. Right. We don't get to scream at each other. We don't get to be rude to each other. We don't get to take each other down. But we should be mature enough to discuss and learn. Like, I like it when people disagree with me. I like saying, oh, why? And figuring out and thinking, oh, am I wrong? Am I right? Oh, maybe I could change my opinion a bit there. To me, this is the grist for the mill of being a writer. And we are letting that freedom go. We are letting people take it from us. We're giving it away. It's terrible. And as you say, it doesn't just affect the work, it actually affects the way you think.
Yeah.
People can't think freely anymore.
No, they can't. Yes, unfortunately, we've only got like a few minutes left. Yeah, I know. We can go on forever. But is there anything else in your story that you want to mention before we finish? The one thing I did want to ask you is, when you were friends, did you get a sense of that she was interacting with you on a racial level? Like, was she treating you like a white woman? I'm an Asian woman, and there's this power dynamic, and
No, I didn't really get that. I didn't get that so much. I know someone else, there's another wonderful writer called Real McMaster who came out of the woodwork, and I don't think she'll mind me mentioning because she's been quite open on social media about her interactions. She was also a friend of Elaine's, and she said that she had a similar experience where they began by being friends. Elaine sort of looked up to her and was looking to her for guidance in the writing world, and at a certain point it sort of flipped, and she started to sort of say, "Oh, well, you're just a white woman," and things like that. So I think we would have got there. We got there. Yeah. We just probably missed that step and just jumped to the whole "I'll take you down" step, right? But no, right. I think that was a thing in her consciousness. But I think really, and I think this is when I wrote about griftivism, it's more just about people knowing that this movement had arisen and that there was something that was to be had there. And if they jumped on board, they could, leverage their, in inverted commas, marginalised status at that point in time.
Yeah. It's a hustle.
It's a hustle. It's a hustle. Yeah.
Because quite often, we have to go very shortly, but more often than not, like these people of colour who are in this industry, more often than not, they're on the fringe of their own communities. They don't represent their communities.
Yeah, right.
They come to the literary scene and act as though they represent their own, their own communities. But quite often not, they don't. I know Somalis who do that, Africans who do that. But I'm like, yo, you don't represent your community. You're queer and all these things. I know your community does not accept that. So.
Yeah, that's right. And I think sometimes it's just ignorance on the behalf of the people who are watching and who don't want to question that person because, you're a white person, you don't want to say to that person of colour, well, you don't represent your community because, it just sounds a bit arrogant and ignorant. But so there's a space for grifters, for bad faith players to come in. And I think basically that's what happened to me. It's not so much that people, of course there are people who actually really maybe people who did read that piece and didn't like it and have some good faith arguments to bring to me. Great, bring them. Right. Let's talk, right? Not a problem. Right. But it's that taking down of people, which is it's taking down the arts, it's taking down people's freedom. Yeah. And people need to grow a set, I think, and learn to say, well, actually, I disagree.
Yes.
Big deal. You disagree. The world's not going to end.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Which is why you and I are going to start a podcast.
We are, aren't we crazy?
We're going for it.
We're going for our second cancellation.
Well, your cancellation was nothing. Mine was nothing compared to yours. But
Oh, you might get to experience it soon.
And we can have a drink to that.
Excellent.
Once that happens.
So yes, we're going to start Unpersoned.
Yes.
It's very exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Verity Love will rise again. So it's interesting because Verity means truth. And I always thought we sort of lived and died on the sword of our truth, but hopefully we'll rise again and we'll talk about another sort of truth, right? So look out for everyone. Verity Unpersoned coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll be probably saying some outrageous things and be very entertaining. And I'd like to plug your book that we have coming up. So we previously published a lot of chapbooks. We just started up Verity La Press. It was really fledgling. But that book, which now circling back to the beginning of our conversation, which your racist, anti-racist white professor or whatever it was wouldn't publish because you're apparently Islamophobic to write your own life experience.
Right. Yeah.
You were looking for a publisher, so I thought, okay, let's get Verdi La Presse going, right? This is the perfect book for us to publish. So Stop All the Clocks from Mug and coming out in a couple of weeks from Verdi La Presse.
Yeah. So stay tuned. I'm so excited about that.
Oh, same.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much,
Yes,
Michelle.
thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks,
and,
Morgan.
this is people are going to learn from this story and they're going to love it. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
I'll just be hiding under the bed.
Oh, good. All right, guys.
Okay,
Peace out.
thank you.